The sky above Earth broke apart in fire. Admiral Sarah Cade stood on the bridge of the Guardian, Earth's largest warship, and watched the enemy fleet drop out of warp. There were hundreds of them. Big, dark ships, shaped like blades, moving in perfect lines. The Thren ascendancy had come, just like the scouts had warned. But no one had believed the scouts. No one had believed an empire that size would bother with a small, young species like humanity. They were wrong. "Admiral, they are not slowing down," said Lieutenant Owens, her voice tight. "They are moving straight for the planet." Sarah gripped the edge of her command chair, her knuckles turned white. "All ships, form defensive line Alpha. Do not let them past us. Earth is behind us. There is nowhere else to fall back to." 200 human ships moved into position. It was the largest fleet humanity had ever built. It had taken 40 years to construct, using metal pulled from the asteroid belt and fusion engines designed by the smartest minds on the planet. Every ship carried a name that meant something. The Guardian, the Liberty, the Second Chance. Humans had put their hope into steel and called it a navy. Against the Thren ascendancy, it looked like a handful of pebbles thrown at a mountain. The enemy fleet opened fire first. Beams of blue-white energy tore across the black of space. The Second Chance took 3 hits before its shields even finished charging. It broke apart in a silent flash, its crew of 400 gone in less than 2 seconds. Sarah watched the dot vanish from her tactical display and felt something cold settle into her chest. "Return fire," she shouted. "All batteries, target their lead ships." Human cannons answered. Missiles streaked out, hundreds of them, aimed at the closest Thren cruisers. For a moment, it looked like it might work. 3 enemy ships lit up with explosions along their hulls. Cheers broke out across the bridge. Then the Thren shields flared back to full strength, and the damage healed itself like a wound closing. "Their shields regenerate faster than ours," Owen said. "Admiral, we cannot match that kind of technology." Sarah had known this was coming. Every report from the border colonies said the same thing. The Thren ascendancy had ruled 100 star systems for over 1,000 years. They had fought and defeated a dozen other species before humans had even left their solar system. Their ships were built from designs older than human civilization itself. But humans had one thing the Thren did not expect. Humans did not know how to give up. "Concentrate fire on their flagship," Sarah ordered. "If we can kill their commander, it might slow them down." The Guardian turned its full firepower on the largest Thren ship, a massive vessel 3 kilometers long, painted black and silver. Its name, translated by the ship's computer from an intercepted transmission, was the Hand of Judgment. Aboard that very ship, Grand Admiral Kalis Vorn watched the human fleet with something between curiosity and boredom. He was a tall being, over 8 feet, with dark green skin and eyes like polished stone. He had crushed 3 rebellions and conquered 2 entire star systems in his 300 years of service. This attack on Earth was supposed to be simple, a show of force, a lesson for a species that had grown too proud. "They fight harder than the reports suggested," said his second-in-command, a smaller Thren named Isk Tarnu. "They fight like cornered animals," Vorn replied. "It changes nothing. Order the second wave forward. End this quickly." More Thren ships poured out of warp behind the first wave. Now there were over 400 enemy vessels surrounding the tiny human fleet. Sarah watched her tactical display fill with red icons, more and more of them, until the green icons of her own ships looked like a small island in a red ocean. "Admiral," Owen said quietly, "we are losing." "I know," Sarah said. Her voice did not shake, even though her hands did. "Keep fighting. Every minute we survive is a minute Earth has to prepare its ground defenses." The battle raged for 6 hours. Human ships fought with everything they had. Captain Torres of the Liberty rammed his damaged ship into a Thren cruiser, taking both vessels down in a massive explosion. Pilots flew fighters directly into enemy weapon ports, sacrificing themselves to open gaps in the Thren formation. It was not enough. It could never have been enough. By the 6th hour, only 12 human ships remained. The Guardian itself was burning, half its hull torn away, life support failing on 6 decks. Sarah Cade sat in her command chair, blood running down the side of her face from a cut she did not remember getting. Around her, the bridge crew worked in silence, too tired and too afraid to speak. On the main screen, the Thren fleet closed in for the final blow. "Admiral," said a voice from the communications station. It was Ensign Park, barely 20 years old, his hands shaking as he worked his console. "I have General Cole from Earth Command. He says it is time." Sarah closed her eyes for 1 second. Then she opened them and nodded. "Send it. Send the signal. All of it." Ensign Park typed a code into his console, a code that had been prepared years ago and never used. It was called Directive Sunrise. Very few people in the entire human government knew what it truly meant. Even Sarah only knew part of the plan. She knew that somewhere in the depths of Earth's deep space network, a signal was about to be sent out to every corner of human space. Beyond that, she did not know the details. She only knew that Earth's leaders had planned for this moment for a very long time, ever since the first reports of an alien empire had reached human ears 3 decades earlier. The signal left Earth at the speed of light, racing outward in all directions, carried by hidden relay stations that no enemy scanner had ever detected. It would take days, weeks, even months, to reach the farthest human colonies, but it was sent. That was what mattered. On the bridge of the Hand of Judgment, Grand Admiral Vorn watched the last human ships fall silent, one by one. The Guardian took a direct hit to its main reactor. The explosion was bright enough to be seen from the surface of Earth. "The human fleet has been destroyed," Isk Tarnu reported. "All ships accounted for, except a handful of fighters, which are of no threat." Vorn allowed himself a small, satisfied nod. "Good. Begin orbital bombardment of their military installations. We will demonstrate our strength, then offer them the chance to surrender as a client state. It is more efficient than full conquest." "And if they refuse to surrender?" "They just lost their entire navy," Vorn said. "They have nothing left to fight with. They will surrender. They have no other choice." He did not know about Directive Sunrise. He did not know that Earth's fleet had never been humanity's true strength. He did not know that for the past 30 years, human engineers, scientists, and soldiers had been quietly building something far larger and far more dangerous than the fleet he had just destroyed. He did not know that the signal his sensors had briefly detected and dismissed as meaningless static was in fact the most important transmission in human history. Far away, on a mining colony called New Meridian, orbiting a red dwarf star 20 light-years from Earth, a young officer named Captain Elena Reyes sat in a quiet control room, drinking bad coffee and reading reports about ore shipments. It was an ordinary day, like thousands before it. Then an alarm began to sound. Not the usual alarm for equipment failure or minor emergencies. This was a different sound, one she had heard only once before, during a training drill 5 years earlier. It was a sound she had hoped she would never hear for real. She stood up so fast her coffee spilled across the desk. She did not care. "Report," she said to the technician nearest her. The technician's face had gone pale. "Captain, it's the sunrise signal. It's real. Earth has activated Directive Sunrise." For a moment, the room went completely silent. Every person there understood what this meant. It meant Earth's fleet was gone. It meant the homeworld itself might be under attack. And it meant that everything they had trained for, everything they had built in secret for years, was about to become real. Elena felt fear rise in her chest, quickly followed by something else. Something like purpose. "Everyone, to your stations," she said, her voice steady, despite the fear underneath it. "Wake the fleet." Deep beneath the surface of New Meridian, in caverns carved out of solid rock over 2 decades of secret construction, massive doors began to open. Lights flickered on inside enormous hangars that had been hidden from every scan, every survey, every curious eye that had ever passed through the system. And there, row after row, sat warships, hundreds of them. Ships built using technology no one outside a small circle of human scientists had ever seen. Ships that had been waiting, silent and ready, for this exact moment. New Meridian was not the only colony receiving the signal. Across dozens of star systems, in places the Thren Ascendancy had never even bothered to survey, similar hangars were opening. Similar fleets were waking up. Similar officers were standing at their stations, hearts pounding, staring at screens that showed the same 3 words repeated over and over. Directive Sunrise. Active. Humanity's homeworld had fallen silent under Thren attack. Its main fleet was gone, turned to wreckage and scattered across the space above Earth. Grand Admiral Kalis Vorn believed he had won a quick and easy victory over a young, weak species that did not understand its place in the galaxy. He had no idea what he had truly started. Back on Earth, deep in an underground bunker beneath what had once been the city of Geneva, General Marcus Cole watched reports come in of Thren ships beginning to bombard human cities from orbit. Buildings fell, fires spread, people ran for shelter. It was the darkest day in human history, and it was not yet over. But Cole did not look defeated. He stood in front of a massive display, showing dots of light spread across a map of known space. Dozens of them, each one representing a human colony that had just received the sunrise signal. "Sir," said a young officer beside him, "the colonies are responding. All of them. Every single one." Cole allowed himself a small, grim smile. It was the first time he had smiled in 6 hours. "Let the Empire enjoy their victory for now," he said quietly. "It will be short." Outside, the sky above Earth burned with the fires of an alien invasion. Below the ground, in bunkers and control rooms across the ruined but unconquered planet, humans held onto a single thought that would carry them through the darkest days ahead. Earth's fleet was destroyed, but Earth was never humanity's only strength. It never had been. And far out among the stars, humanity's true fleet was just beginning to wake up. The signal reached 41 human colonies over the course of 3 weeks. It traveled slower than light for the first few hops, hidden inside encrypted data packets that looked like harmless commercial traffic, bouncing between relay buoys that had been placed decades earlier by ships flying under fake company names. No Thren scanner ever caught it. No Thren analyst ever noticed anything strange. The signal was built to be invisible, and it did its job perfectly. On New Meridian, Captain Elena Reyes stood in the largest hangar she had ever seen, watching 200 warships power up their engines for the first time in years. The ships had names painted along their hulls, names chosen by the engineers who built them in total secrecy. The Defiant. The Long Watch. The Homecoming. They were smaller than the Thren dreadnoughts, but faster, and armed with weapons based on research that Earth's scientists had kept hidden even from their own government for years, afraid that any leak could reach the wrong ears. "Captain, all ships report ready for launch," said her second-in-command, a quiet man named Lieutenant Okafor. "What are your orders?" Elena looked at the fleet before her. 200 ships. It felt like both too many and nowhere near enough. "We rendezvous at the coordinates in the Sunrise Protocol," she said. "Every other colony fleet will be doing the same. We move together, or we don't move at all." She had read the full details of Directive Sunrise only once, in a locked room, under the supervision of 2 guards, 3 years earlier. It had explained everything. For decades, ever since the first deep space probes detected signs of an advanced alien civilization, Earth's leaders had known that first contact with a major power might not go well. History had taught humans that when a stronger group meets a weaker group, the weaker group usually loses everything. So instead of putting all of humanity's strength into one fleet at Earth, where an enemy could destroy it in a single battle, human leaders had spread their strength out. They built shipyards on colonies far from Earth, hidden in asteroid fields and buried beneath planetary crusts. They trained officers and crews in secret, telling the public these bases were mining operations or research stations. They built an entire second navy, larger than the one everyone knew about, and told almost no one it existed. It had cost enormous amounts of money and resources. It had taken 30 years. Many people who helped build it never lived to see the day it would be used. But on that day, as ships rose out of hidden hangars across dozens of star systems, the plan finally made sense to everyone involved. 2,000 light-years from New Meridian, on a frozen ice moon colony called Ashworth Station, an old engineer named Marta Volkov watched the same signal arrive on her screen. She had helped design the very ships now waking up in hangars across human space. She was 67 years old and had spent half her life on this project, giving up a normal career, a normal family life, everything, because she believed this day might come. "Is it really happening?" asked her assistant, a young engineer named Diego, who had only worked at Ashworth Station for 2 years and knew nothing about the true purpose of the colony's massive underground facilities. "It's happening," Marta said. Her voice was quiet, almost sad. I always hoped it wouldn't, but I built these ships to be used, and now they will be used. She walked through the control room and pressed her palm against a scanner. A door opened, leading to a viewing platform overlooking the largest hangar in the colony. Below her, 300 warships sat in perfect rows, their hulls painted dark blue, the color chosen because it matched the deep ice caves where the colony had been built. These were not small patrol ships. These were heavy cruisers, built with weapons designed specifically to counter Thren's shield technology that human scientists had studied for years, using data secretly gathered from encounters with Thren's scout ships along the border of known space. "Wake them all," Marta said. "Every ship, every crew, it's time." Across human space, the same scene repeated itself again and again. On Calder's Reach, a desert colony known publicly for its farming exports, 500 fighters launched from hidden underground silos, their pilots trained for this exact moment through years of simulations they had believed were only exercises. On Haven Prime, the largest of the outer colonies, an entire second government activated, one that had existed in secret for over a decade, made up of officials whose only job was to manage this exact crisis, if it ever came. On Vega Outpost, a research colony that the public believed only studied asteroid mining techniques, 3 massive shipyards revealed themselves to be something else entirely, factories capable of producing new warships at a speed that would have shocked the Thren ascendancy, had they known about it. And on Terra Nova, the second largest human colony after Earth itself, home to over 200 million people, a woman named Fleet Admiral Rachel Chen stood in a command center built specifically for this moment. Unlike the other colony commanders, Chen knew the full plan. She had helped write it 15 years earlier, back when she was a much younger officer working under General Cole himself. She was the one person in the entire colonial network with the authority to coordinate all the awakening fleets into a single, unified force. "Admiral, we have confirmation," said her communications officer. "All 41 colonies report successful activation. Total combined fleet strength is approximately 8,000 vessels." Chen closed her eyes for a moment. 8,000 ships. It was more than double the size of the fleet the Thren ascendancy had used to destroy Earth's navy. It had taken 30 years, unimaginable amounts of money, and the total secrecy of hundreds of thousands of people to build, and it had all been done for this single moment. "What is the status of Earth?" she asked. "Bad, Admiral. Orbital bombardment has been ongoing for 3 weeks. Major cities have taken damage. Casualties are high, but Earth's underground shelters have saved millions of lives. General Cole reports the Thren fleet has not attempted a ground invasion yet. It appears they are waiting for a surrender." "They will not get one," Chen said firmly. "Begin coordinating the colonial fleets. I want every ship moving toward the rally point within 48 hours. The rally point was a quiet, empty region of space between 3 uninhabited star systems, chosen years earlier because it sat roughly at the center of all 41 colonies, far enough from any populated system that Thren patrols were unlikely to notice unusual activity, but close enough that ships from every colony could reach it within a reasonable time. Over the following days, ships began arriving from every direction. Elena Reyes brought her 200 ships from New Meridian, arriving to find hundreds of other vessels already gathered, their crews staring out at a sight none of them had ever imagined seeing. An entire second human navy, built in total secrecy, finally united in one place. Marta Volkov's 300 cruisers from Ashworth Station arrived 2 days later, followed by fighter wings from Calder's Reach, and cargo haulers converted into makeshift troop transports from a dozen smaller colonies. Slowly, over the course of a week, the rally point filled with more human warships than had ever been gathered in one place in the entire history of the species. Elena stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Defiant. Watching the tactical display fill with green icons stretching in every direction, she had never seen anything like it. Neither had anyone else alive. "Lieutenant Okafor," she said quietly, "how many ships do we have now?" Okafor checked his display, his eyes widening slightly. "Current count is 6,200 vessels, Captain, with more arriving every hour." Elena let out a slow breath. 6,000 ships. It was more than she had ever imagined humanity could build, let alone build in secret. And it was still growing. A new transmission came through on the main channel, broadcast to every ship in the fleet at once. Fleet Admiral Chen's face appeared on screens across the assembled navy, her expression calm but serious. "This is Fleet Admiral Rachel Chen, speaking to every crew of the Colonial Defense Fleet," she began. "3 weeks ago, the Thren Ascendancy attacked our homeworld. They destroyed our first fleet, believing it was all we had. They believed a young, weak species would simply surrender once its capital was threatened." She paused, letting her words settle across the gathered ships. "They were wrong. For 30 years, we built something they never saw. We spread our strength across the stars, instead of putting it all in one place. We prepared for the worst, and hoped we would never need it. That hope is gone now. But our preparation remains, and it stands ready, right now, in this fleet." Across the assembled ships, crews listened in silence. Many of them had spent years training for a moment they had begun to believe would never come. Now it was here. "Our mission is simple," Chen continued. "We are going to Earth. We are going to break the Thren fleet that sits above our homeworld, and we are going to remind this empire, and every empire that might be watching, that humanity does not surrender. Prepare your ships. We depart in 6 hours." The transmission ended. For a long moment, silence held across the fleet. Then, slowly, cheers began to rise on ship after ship, spreading through the massive gathered navy like a wave. Elena Reyes did not cheer. She stood quietly on her bridge, looking out at the stars, thinking about the battle ahead. She had trained her entire career for this exact fight, and now that it was finally here, she felt only a calm, focused determination. "Set a course for Earth," she said to her navigation officer. "Match speed with the fleet formation. We leave with everyone else." Far above Earth, Grand Admiral Kalis Vorn continued his slow, patient bombardment, waiting for the human government to send a message of surrender that would never come. He had no scanners capable of detecting a fleet still weeks away, gathering strength in the quiet dark between distant stars. He had no idea that the empty victory he believed he had already won was about to be challenged by a force larger than anything the Thren Ascendancy had ever fought before. 6,000 human warships, and growing, began their journey toward Earth. Behind them, the shipyards of 41 colonies continued working around the clock, building more ships, training more crews, preparing reinforcements for whatever losses the coming battle would bring. Humanity's true fleet was on its way home. The journey to Earth took 9 days. Fleet Admiral Rachel Chen used every one of those days to prepare her people for the fight ahead. Ships were organized into battle groups, each one built around a mix of heavy cruisers, fast attack ships, and support vessels. Crews ran drills constantly, practicing formations that had only ever existed in simulations before. Elena Reyes barely slept during those 9 days, spending her time moving between the bridge and the training decks of the Defiant, making sure every one of her people understood their role in the coming battle. On the 6th day, Chen called a meeting of her senior commanders, projected as holograms into a central conference room aboard her flagship, the Horizon. Elena Reyes attended from the Defiant. Marta Volkov, now serving as fleet engineering director despite her age, attended from Ashworth Station's lead cruiser. A dozen other commanders joined from across the fleet. "Our scouts report the Thren fleet at Earth has not moved in 3 weeks, Chen said, pointing to a display showing the enemy positions around the human homeworld. "They believe the war is already won. They are sitting in a loose formation, confident, not expecting any threat." "How many ships do they have in system?" asked one of the commanders. "Approximately 3,500, Chen answered. "Less than half our current strength, but we should not underestimate their technology. Their shields regenerate faster than ours. Their weapons are more powerful ship for ship. Numbers alone will not win this fight." Marta Volkov spoke up, her voice steady despite her age. "During the design of our fleet, we studied every piece of data we could gather on Thren shield technology. Their shields work by redirecting energy into a secondary containment field, which is what allows them to heal so quickly after taking damage. But that containment field has a weakness. If enough weapons fire hits a Thren ship's shields at almost exactly the same moment, faster than the containment field can redirect the energy, the shield will collapse entirely for a short time." "How short?" Elena asked. "Approximately 4 seconds, Marta said. "It is not much. But it is enough, if our ships are ready to fire the moment it happens." Chen nodded slowly. "This is why we built the fleet, in coordinated battle groups, instead of individual ships acting alone. Every group will focus fire on single targets at the same moment, using synchronized timing systems built into our weapons array. We collapse their shields, then we strike before they recover. The plan was simple in concept, but difficult in practice. It required precise coordination between hundreds of ships at once, timing that left no room for error. Over the following 3 days, every battle group in the fleet practiced the technique against simulated targets, refining the timing again and again until the coordination became almost automatic. On the 9th day, the fleet dropped out of warp on the edge of Earth's solar system. Grand Admiral Kalis Vorn was in his private quarters aboard the Hand of Judgment. When the alert came through, he had grown used to quiet days above the conquered human world, waiting for a surrender that had still not arrived despite weeks of bombardment. The human government's stubbornness had begun to annoy him, but he had not been overly concerned. Their fleet was gone. Their planet was helpless. It was only a matter of time. "Grand Admiral," said Isk Tarnu through the comm system, his voice unusually tense. "Long-range sensors have detected a massive fleet emerging at the edge of the system. Preliminary count suggests over 6,000 vessels." Vorn sat up sharply. "That is not possible." "Confirm the reading." "Confirmed, Grand Admiral. The signature matches human ship designs, but larger and more advanced than anything encountered in the initial engagement. They are moving toward our position at high speed." Vorn stood and quickly made his way to the bridge, his mind racing. 6,000 ships. It was more than the entire fleet he had brought to conquer this system. It was more than most Thren fleet groups anywhere in the Empire. Where had they come from? His intelligence reports had shown no sign of a second human fleet anywhere in known space. "Bring up full tactical display," he ordered as he arrived on the bridge. The main screen filled with a wave of green icons approaching from the outer edge of the solar system. More ships than the sensors had ever tracked at once in this region of space. "This cannot be their entire strength," Vorn muttered, more to himself than to his crew. "We destroyed their fleet. We saw it happen." "Perhaps," Isk Tarnu said carefully. "We did not destroy their entire fleet, Grand Admiral. Perhaps we only destroyed what they allowed us to see." Vorn's jaw tightened. The idea that this young species had deceived him, had hidden a fleet larger than his own for weeks while he sat comfortably in orbit, waiting for a surrender, filled him with a cold fury. But fury would not win this battle. He needed to think clearly. "All ships, form defensive formation," he ordered. "Recall all bombardment operations. Every vessel prepares for combat." Across the Thren fleet, ships began breaking off from their positions around Earth, moving to form up into a defensive wall between the planet and the approaching human fleet. It was a strong formation, built from centuries of Thren military doctrine, designed to withstand assaults from empires far more advanced than any the Thren had encountered in their long history of conquest. It had never faced a fleet using human tactics before. Fleet Admiral Chen watched the Thren formation solidify on her tactical display, 3,500 ships arranging themselves into overlapping defensive rings around Earth. It was an impressive formation. It would have been almost impossible to break with conventional tactics. "All battle groups, prepare synchronized strike protocol," Chen ordered across the fleet-wide channel. "Target selection is priority 1, their outer ring first. We break through layer by layer. On the Defiant." Elena Reyes gripped the arms of her command chair as her ship moved into position alongside 11 others in her assigned battle group. "Weapons crews, stand by for synchronized fire on my mark," she said. "Remember your timing. We only get one clean shot at their shields before they adapt." The two fleets closed the distance between them. Space between Earth and the approaching human ships filled with the tension of a battle about to begin. The largest space battle in human history, and possibly the largest the Thren Ascendancy had fought in over a century. Grand Admiral Vorn opened a channel to the approaching fleet, broadcasting on all known human frequencies. His voice, translated through his ship's systems into English, carried a tone of genuine confusion mixed with growing respect. "Human fleet, this is Grand Admiral Kalis Vorn of the Thren Ascendancy. You have hidden your true strength from us. This was unexpected. I offer you one chance to withdraw. Surrender this system, and I will consider ending hostilities with minimal further bloodshed." Chen answered the transmission from her flagship, her voice calm and clear. "This is Fleet Admiral Rachel Chen. You attacked our homeworld without provocation. You bombarded our cities and killed our people. There will be no surrender. There will only be an answer." She closed the channel and turned to her tactical officer. "Begin the attack." 6,000 human warships surged forward, breaking into their designated battle groups, each one targeting a specific section of the Thren defensive formation. The synchronized strike protocol activated across the fleet, weapon systems firing in perfectly timed bursts, designed to overwhelm Thren shields faster than their containment fields could compensate. The first wave of Thren ships in the outer ring took the full force of the coordinated assault. Their shields flared bright, held for a fraction of a second under the concentrated fire, and then collapsed entirely. Before the shocked Thren crews could react, a second wave of human fire tore through their unshielded hulls, destroying 20 ships in the first 30 seconds of the battle. On the bridge of the Hand of Judgment, Kalis Vorn watched in disbelief as the reports came in. He had never seen a coordinated attack of this precision, not from any species he had ever fought. Human tactics were nothing like Thren tactics, which relied on the raw strength of their shields and the individual skill of their ship commanders. Humans fought as a single, unified organism, every ship moving in support of every other ship. "Grand Admiral, we are losing the outer ring," Isk Tarnu reported, urgency clear in his voice. "Their fire coordination is breaking through our shields faster than our doctrine accounts for." "Reform the formation," Vorn ordered, forcing calm into his voice despite the alarm building inside him. "Pull the second ring forward to reinforce. We cannot allow them to punch through to the planet." The battle raged on, ship against ship, wave against wave. Elena Reyes's battle group destroyed 4 Thren cruisers in the first 10 minutes, but lost 2 of their own ships to a sudden counterattack from a Thren strike squadron that broke through their flank. She watched the Homecoming, a ship she had trained alongside for 3 years, take a direct hit and break apart on her tactical display, and felt her chest tighten with grief that she had no time to feel fully. There was still a battle to fight. "Compensate for their flanking maneuver," she ordered, adjusting her battle group's formation. "Bring Group 4 around to cover our left side." Across the entire battle, thousands of ships fought in a chaos of light and fire that stretched across the space above Earth. Below, on the planet's surface, people watched the distant flashes in the night sky and understood, for the first time in 3 weeks, that they were not alone. Something had come to fight for them. By the 4th hour of battle, the Thren outer defensive ring had been completely destroyed. The human fleet, though it had taken serious losses of its own, pressed forward into the second ring, where Grand Admiral Vorn had gathered his strongest ships in a desperate attempt to hold the line. The battle for Earth had only just begun, but for the first time since the war started, the Thren ascendancy found itself fighting for survival instead of simply enforcing conquest. Kalis Vorn stood on his bridge, watching his once confident fleet struggle against an enemy he had badly underestimated, and understood, with growing dread, that this war was not going to end the way he had believed it would. He had come to Earth expecting an easy victory over a weak, primitive species. He had found something else entirely. By the 8th hour of battle, both fleets had taken heavy losses. The space above Earth had become a graveyard of broken hulls, drifting debris, and slowly dimming fires. Nearly 1,000 human ships had been destroyed or crippled. The Thren ascendancy had lost even more, their outer and second defensive rings almost entirely wiped out. But Grand Admiral Kalis Vorn had not given up. He had pulled his remaining strength, over 2,000 ships, into a tight formation directly above Earth's northern hemisphere, using the planet itself as a shield against attacks from certain angles. On the horizon, Fleet Admiral Rachel Chen studied the new Thren formation with a troubled expression. "They've adapted," she said to her tactical staff. "They are using the planet to limit our approach angles. If we press a direct assault, we will be funneled into a narrow attack lane where their concentrated fire will cause serious losses." "What are your orders, Admiral?" asked her chief of staff. Chen studied the display for a long moment. She thought about the 30 years of planning that had led to this fleet, the sacrifices of everyone who had built it in secret, and the people still suffering on the planet below. She could not afford a costly, direct assault. She needed something smarter. "Signal Captain Reyes," she said finally. "I want to hear her assessment of the northern approach." Elena Reyes had spent the last 2 hours pulling her battle group back from the front lines to resupply and repair, watching the larger battle unfold from a safer distance. When Chen's request came through, she studied the tactical display carefully before responding. "Admiral, their formation has a weakness," Elena said over the comm channel. "By pulling in tight around the planet, they've created overlapping shield coverage between their ships, which makes a direct assault costly, as you said. But it also means they cannot easily move ships to reinforce their flanks without breaking that overlap. If we can hit them from 2 directions at once, forcing them to choose between maintaining their shield coverage or defending both flanks, we might be able to create the same shield collapse effect we used earlier, but on a much larger scale." Chen considered this. "You are suggesting we split our remaining fleet?" "Yes, Admiral. Send one force to press them directly from the position we currently hold, keeping their attention forward. Send a second force in a wide loop around the far side of the planet, approaching from an angle they won't expect. If both forces strike at the same time, their formation will not be able to hold." It was a risky plan. Splitting the fleet meant each half would be more vulnerable if the timing failed. But Chen had learned to trust the instincts of her commanders, especially ones like Elena Reyes, who had proven herself repeatedly throughout the battle. "Do it," Chen said. "I want you leading the flanking force personally, Captain. You understand the timing better than anyone else in this fleet." Elena felt a mixture of pride and fear settle into her chest. Leading a force of over 2,000 ships around the far side of Earth, timing an attack against an enemy who now knew how dangerous human coordination could be, was not a small responsibility. But she had trained her entire life for moments like this one. "Understood, Admiral. I'll need 6 hours to reposition without being detected." "You have 5, Chen said. "Earth cannot wait much longer. Their bombardment resumed on the southern continent an hour ago. People are dying down there while we plan." Elena nodded sharply, even though Chen could not see it through the comm channel. 5 hours, Admiral. We'll be ready." The next 5 hours were some of the tensest of Elena's life. She led her flanking force in a wide, careful arc around the far side of Earth, keeping her ship's engine signatures as low as possible to avoid Thren detection. It was a delicate balance between speed and stealth, and every minute felt like it stretched longer than the last. Meanwhile, the remaining human fleet, under Chen's direct command, maintained pressure on the Thren formation from the front, launching smaller, probing attacks, designed to keep Vorn's attention focused forward, without committing to the full assault that would eventually come from both directions at once. Aboard the Hand of Judgment, Kalis Vorn watched the ongoing skirmishes with growing unease. Something about the pattern of the human attacks felt wrong. They were probing, testing, never fully committing. It reminded him of a predator, waiting for the right moment to strike, rather than a fleet simply continuing its assault. "Iskatarnu," he said, "have our sensors detected any unusual movement on our flanks or rear?" "Nothing unusual, Grand Admiral, though our sensor range has been degraded by the debris field from earlier fighting." Vorn frowned. In 1,000 years of Thren military history, deception and misdirection had rarely been used against them by lesser species, simply because most species they had encountered lacked the discipline or coordination to pull off complex tactics. This was different. Everything about this war had been different from what his experience had prepared him for. "Increase sensor sweeps on all flanks," he ordered. "I want early warning if anything approaches from an unexpected direction." But even increased sensor sweeps struggled against the low engine signatures Elena's fleet maintained during its careful approach. By the time Thren sensors finally detected the flanking force, it was less than 10 minutes from striking distance, far too late to reposition an entire fleet formation without creating exactly the kind of gap Elena had been counting on. "Grand Admiral," Isktarnu's voice cracked with sudden alarm. "New contact, over 2,000 vessels, approaching from the far side of the planet. They will be in weapons range in 8 minutes. Vorn's mind raced through his options. If he moved ships to cover the new threat, he would weaken his formation against Chen's forces still pressing from the front. If he did not respond, the flanking force would tear through his exposed rear with devastating effect. "All ships, prepare to divide formation," he ordered, knowing even as he said it that this was exactly the outcome the humans had planned for. "Rear guard, prepare to engage the new contact. Forward formation, maintain position against the primary force. It was too late to do anything else. The moment Thren ships began shifting to address the flanking threat, gaps opened in their overlapping shield coverage, exactly as Elena had predicted. "Now, Admiral," Elena said over the fleet-wide channel to Chen, "their formation is breaking. Begin the full assault." Chen gave the order immediately. Every remaining human ship under her direct command surged forward at once, hitting the weakened front of the Thren formation with everything they had. At the same moment, Elena's flanking force closed the final distance and struck the Thren rear guard, catching them still repositioning, shields not yet fully aligned to handle the incoming attack. The effect was devastating. Caught between two coordinated assaults, unable to maintain the overlapping shield coverage that had protected them for hours, Thren ships began falling one after another. The Hand of Judgment itself took heavy damage, 3 of its main shield generators knocked offline by a concentrated strike from Elena's battle group. "Grand Admiral, we are losing more than 60 ships every 10 minutes, Isk Tarnu reported, his voice now openly showing fear. "At this rate, our entire fleet will be destroyed within the hour." Kalis Vorn stood on his damaged bridge, alarms blaring around him, and faced a decision that no Thren commander had faced in centuries: continue the fight and likely lose his entire fleet, or retreat and preserve what remained, accepting a defeat that would echo through the halls of Thren power for generations. He thought of his orders, given by the Thren High Council before he had departed for this campaign. Conquer or subdue the human species, expand the borders of the ascendancy, demonstrate Thren's strength to any who might doubt it. He thought of the price of failure, and the price of continuing a battle he could no longer win. "All ships," he said finally, his voice heavy but steady, "begin fighting withdrawal. We are leaving this system." "Grand Admiral, that will be seen as—" "I am aware of what it will be seen as," Vorn snapped, "but a dead fleet serves no one. We withdraw, we regroup, and we report to the High Council what we have learned here today. This species is far more dangerous than our intelligence suggested. That information is worth more than our pride." The order spread through the remaining Thren ships. Slowly, painfully, under continued human fire, the Thren Ascendancy fleet began to pull back from Earth's orbit, forming a defensive rear guard to cover their retreat, while the majority of surviving ships jumped to warp speed and fled the system. On the Defiant, Elena Reyes watched the enemy fleet break apart and begin its retreat, feeling a wave of exhausted relief wash over her. "Admiral," she said into the comm, her voice hoarse from hours of continuous combat, "the Thren fleet is withdrawing." Fleet Admiral Chen's reply came back a moment later, quiet with her own exhaustion. "Confirmed. All ships, do not pursue past the system boundary. Focus on securing Earth's orbit and beginning rescue operations for any surviving human ships. We have won this battle." Cheers rose across the fleet-wide channel, exhausted but genuine, as crews who had fought for over 8 hours straight finally allowed themselves to believe they had survived. On the surface of Earth, people who had spent 3 weeks hiding in shelters from constant bombardment slowly emerged to find the skies clear of enemy ships for the first time since the invasion began. But Elena Reyes, watching the last Thren ships vanish into warp on her tactical display, did not fully share in the celebration around her. She had studied the empire they had just fought against, enough to know one important truth. This was not the end of the war. It was only the first true victory in what would likely be a much longer fight. The Thren Ascendancy ruled 100 star systems. They would not simply accept this defeat and leave humanity alone forever. Somewhere, on a world far from Earth, a Thren High Council would soon learn what had happened here, and they would decide what to do next. Elena closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself a brief pause in the middle of the chaos. Then she opened them, straightened in her chair, and turned her attention to the tasks ahead, securing the system, helping the wounded, and preparing for whatever might come next. Earth was saved, for now. But the war for humanity's future had only just truly begun. 3 months after the Battle of Earth, General Marcus Cole stood on a hill overlooking the rebuilt outskirts of Geneva, watching construction crews work on new buildings, where bombed ruins had stood only weeks before. The sky above was clear and blue, empty of enemy ships, filled instead with the quiet traffic of human transport vessels, moving supplies between the surface and the growing fleet still stationed in orbit. It had not been an easy 3 months. Earth had lost nearly 2 million people during the 3-week bombardment before the colonial fleet arrived. Entire neighborhoods in a dozen major cities had been destroyed. The economic damage would take years, maybe decades, to fully repair. But humanity had survived, and more than that, humanity now knew something it had never fully understood before the war. It was not alone in the galaxy, and it was not as weak as it had once believed. Cole heard footsteps behind him, and turned to see Fleet Admiral Rachel Chen approaching, dressed in a simple uniform, rather than the formal dress she usually wore for official events. She looked tired, the way everyone looked tired these days, but there was a calm steadiness in her eyes that had not been there during the darkest days of the war. "General," she said, coming to stand beside him, "I thought I might find you up here." "Needed some quiet," Cole admitted. "The council meetings get loud." Chen allowed herself a small smile. "They do, though I suppose that's what happens when you have representatives from 41 colonies, all trying to have their voices heard for the first time." That was one of the biggest changes since the war. Before the Thren attack, Earth's government had made most major decisions for all of humanity's territories, with colonies having only limited say in matters that affected them directly. But the war had proven something important. The colonies were not just distant outposts, dependent on Earth for protection. They had built their own fleets, trained their own soldiers, and fought their own battles. They had saved Earth, not the other way around. A new government structure was being formed, one that gave every colony a real voice in humanity's future, a change that had been debated for years, but only truly happened once the colonies proved, beyond any doubt, how much they mattered. "Any word from the diplomatic mission?" Cole asked. Chen's expression grew more serious. "Some. Captain Reyes reports the outpost they established near the border of Thren space has made contact with representatives of the Thren High Council. They are cautious. Grand Admiral Vorn's report about our capabilities seems to have created real concern among their leadership." After the battle, humanity had faced a difficult choice. They could have pressed their advantage, following the retreating Thren fleet and attempting to strike deeper into Thren territory. Many in the government had argued for exactly that, wanting to punish the empire that had attacked their homeworld. But cooler heads had eventually prevailed. The Thren ascendancy still controlled 100 star systems, and vastly more resources than humanity, even after their defeat at Earth. A war of revenge could have ended in humanity's total destruction, no matter how well they had fought in this one battle. Instead, humanity had done something unexpected. They had reached out, offering terms not of surrender, but of peace. A message sent to the Thren High Council, explaining clearly that humanity had no interest in expanding into Thren territory, but would defend itself with everything it had if attacked again. It was a message of strength without aggression, an offer that the Thren ascendancy, still recovering from the shock of their defeat, had cautiously agreed to consider. "Do you think they'll accept real peace?" Cole asked. Chen thought about the question carefully before answering. "I think they respect strength more than anything else. We showed them strength, but we also showed them something they weren't expecting: restraint. We could have pursued them. We could have tried to take territory while they were weak. We didn't. I think that matters to them, even if it takes time for us to understand exactly how much." Far from Earth, at the border outpost where humanity's first true diplomatic mission to the Thren ascendancy was based, Elena Reyes sat in a small conference room, watching a holographic image of a Thren representative discuss trade terms with a team of human negotiators. It was strange to see, after everything that had happened, sitting across from a species that had so recently tried to destroy her homeworld, now discussing the possibility of peaceful relations. She thought often about the battle above Earth, about the ships and crews she had lost, about the terrifying uncertainty of leading a flanking force around an entire planet, with the fate of her species riding on the outcome. It had changed her in ways she was still figuring out. She had grown quieter since the battle, more thoughtful, carrying the weight of command in a way she had not fully understood before it became real. After the negotiation session ended, she walked out onto the outpost's main observation deck, looking out at the stars beyond. A voice behind her made her turn. "Captain Reyes." It was Marta Volkov, the elderly engineer who had helped build the very fleet that saved Earth, now serving as a technical advisor to the diplomatic mission. How did the talks go today? Slowly, Elena said. But they're going. That's more than I expected a few months ago. Marta nodded, coming to stand beside her at the observation window. You know, when I started working on the Sunrise Fleet 30 years ago, I never imagined it would end like this. I thought, if we ever had to use it, it would be the beginning of a long, terrible war, a fight for survival that might never truly end. And now? Now I think maybe we built something more valuable than just a fleet, Marta said. We built proof. Proof that we could defend ourselves without needing to attack first. Proof that even a young species, only a few centuries into space travel, could stand up to an empire that had ruled for 1,000 years. I think that proof is what convinced the Thren to consider peace instead of a second war. They finally understood that fighting us again would cost them more than they could afford, and that we weren't interested in taking anything from them beyond the right to exist safely. Elena looked out at the stars, thinking about everything that had happened since that terrible day when the Thren Ascendancy first attacked Earth. She thought about the crews who had died defending a fleet no one outside a small circle had known existed until it was needed most. She thought about the 30 years of quiet, hidden work that had made humanity's survival possible. Do you think this is really the end of it? She asked. Or just a pause before something worse comes? Marta considered the question for a long moment before answering. I don't know. The galaxy is a big place, Captain, and we've only just started exploring the smallest corner of it. There may be other threats out there we haven't even discovered yet, but I know this. We're not the same species we were before this war. We know now what we're capable of, together. Every colony proved itself. Every hidden shipyard, every secretly trained crew, every year of sacrifice that so many people made, without knowing if it would ever matter. It all mattered. 6 months after the Battle of Earth, the first official peace agreement between humanity and the Thren Ascendancy was signed, establishing a border between human and Thren space, along with limited trade agreements and a promise of non-aggression from both sides. It was not a perfect peace. There were still tensions, still disagreements, still the occasional incident along the newly established border that required careful diplomatic handling. But it was peace, real and lasting, built on a foundation of mutual respect that neither side had expected to find in the other. Back on Earth, a new memorial was completed in the rebuilt city of Geneva, honoring everyone who had died during the invasion and the battle that followed, both the soldiers who had fought and the civilians who had been lost during the bombardment. Engraved at the base of the memorial were words chosen by General Cole himself, words that would be taught to human schoolchildren for generations to come. They came expecting an easy victory over a weak and unprepared people. What they found instead was a species that had quietly prepared for the worst, hoped for the best, and stood ready to defend everything it valued. Earth's fleet was destroyed, but Earth was never alone. Every colony we built, every ship we hid, every person who trained in secret for a war they hoped would never come, all of it stood ready when the moment finally arrived. We were never as weak as they believed. We never will be again. Elena Reyes returned to Earth for a brief visit 2 years later, standing before that memorial with Marta Volkov, Fleet Admiral Chen, and dozens of other officers and engineers who had been part of the secret fleet that saved humanity's homeworld. They did not speak much. There was not much left to say that the memorial itself did not already express. They simply stood together, remembering what they had built, what they had lost, and what they had ultimately won. Above them, in the clear blue sky of a peaceful Earth, human ships moved freely between the planet and the stars beyond, no longer hiding their strength, no longer needing to. Humanity had learned a hard lesson about the dangers of the wider galaxy, but it had also learned something far more valuable, that preparation, unity, and quiet determination could overcome even the greatest of odds. The Thren Ascendancy had come to destroy a weak and unprepared people. They found, instead, a species that refused to be anything less than ready for whatever the galaxy might bring next. And humanity, having proven its strength once, stood ready to prove it again, for as long as the stars required it.